Good morning, everyone. Good Tavach. It's Sunday morning. First full week after Yontif. Baruch Hashem. And we are learning Perek Hey of Maseches Sheviis. Our goal this week is to finish the Masechta by Friday. What a day. And Baruch Hashem. So here we go. Today's shiur is sponsored Lila Nishmas, our Nachum and Sucha Kohen, Yeshua Mordechai ben Shepsel, Bracha Sar Bashbal Leib, we know Moshe ben Yosef and the show us how to Leah and Rafur Shlir Ad Sarah Bas Leah B'Sof Shar Chole Yisrael. Okay, so Mishnah Aleph, Perek Mishnah Aleph starts off. B'no Shuach Sheviis Shalahen Shnia. B'no Shuach. What's B'no Shuach? B'no Shuach are a species of pine with edible cones that are commonly called the white fig tree. So B'no Shuach have their Shemitah in the second year of the 7-year cycle, meaning that B'no Shuach that ripen in the second year after Shemitah have the status of Shemitah produce, not the first year, the second year. Or actually, the second year of the 7-year cycle, which really we count Shemitah as one, the third year, but Shehein Osos the Shalosh Shanim, because they grow over 3 years. They don't ripen so fast. Other fruits they grow in let's say the springtime and they're ready by the summer, or by the fall. But these fruits they take 3 years to grow. And therefore, the ones that started to grow in Shemitah by the end of the second year of the Shemitah cycle, they are now subject to Shemitah restrictions. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Haparsos Sheviis Shlehem Motzi Sheviis." Parsos is also a type of fig. Some of us consider it might be a type of date. They have their Shemitah in the year after the 7th, meaning the 8th year or the first year of the next cycle. This also has Shehein Osos the station. They grow over 2 years. So they might have started growing in the first year, but their Shemitah is in the second year. Lo, the Chachamim disagreed with Rabbi Yehuda, and they said to him, Lo, Amru El B'no Shuach. It was only stated, that rule was only stated regarding B'no Shuach to the white figs, not regarding any other fruits. Mishnah Beis. Now we're going to talk about a type of onion called a loof. Although Rashi identifies loof as a type of bean. Anyways, Hatomin as saluf Sheviis is one buries loof during Shemitah. So what happened over here? The onion is picked and it's buried in the ground to preserve it for use in the future. So it's not being planted, but it looks like it's being planted because you're burying it in the ground. So the Chachamim said that you cannot bury loof on Shemitah except under certain conditions. So Mishnah begins. If one buries loof during Shemitah, Rabbi Meir says that you must observe the following conditions. Lo yefchos misasayim, you may not bury less than 2 shah of loof in a single hole, meaning 12 kav. Ad gova shlosha tvachim. He must pile it up to a height of at least 3 tvachim in the hole. The tefach alfar agavav, and he must put at least a tefach of dirt on top of it. Since loof bulbs are planted by scattering them around, piling many of them together in a tall heap shows that they're being stored and not planted. Usually when you plant them individually. Furthermore, burying them under a tefach of dirt shows they're being stored and not planted. When something is planted, it's covered by just a thin layer of dirt, not very deep down the ground. But the Chachamim say, Lo yifchos miyarba kavim. You may not bury less than 4 kav of loof in a single hole, as opposed to the 12 kav required by Rabbi Meir. I'd go tefach. You must pile it up to a height of at least one tefach, as opposed to the 3 tefachim required by Meir. So the chachamim are more makel. But tefach afar al gabav, and you must put at least a tefach of dirt on top of it, as Meir holds as well. But tona b'machon trisas adam, and you must bury it in a place upon which people walk, because the constant trampling of people on the ground will prevent it from sprouting, and therefore burying it in such a place shows that you did not intend to plant it rather than just to store it. Moving on to Mishnah Gimel. Luf she'avar alav Sheviis. If a luf grew past Shemitah, meaning it produced leaves in Shemitah and then continued growing in the 8th year, Rav Lezer says, "In laktu haniyam es alav laktu." And if the poor people picked all its leaves during Shemitah, they have indeed picked them, and all the leaves are theirs. Since they picked all the Shemitah growth themselves, the owner does not give any to them. But if the Aniyim did not pick all its leaves during Shemitah, the owner must make an accounting with the poor. He has to reckon which portion of the remaining leaves grew during Shemitah and gives that portion to them. But Rishua disagrees. He says, as alav laktu. If the poor picked all its leaves during Shemitah, then they have picked them and all the leaves are theirs. But they did not pick its leaves during Shemitah, and the poor have no accounting with the owner. They only have a right to pick whatever they picked during Shemitah and not anything that they did not pick. So even if some portions of the leaves that are currently on the plant still have Shemitah sanctity, the owner has no obligation to give them to the poor people. Moving right along. Mishnah Dalid. Okay, so now, Luf shall erish Sheviis shenichnas l'Sheviis. Regarding Luf that completed its growth in the 6th year, was still rooted in the ground when Shemitah began. The Bitsalim Hakitzonim, as well as summer onions. These are onions that are planted in early summer and picked in the summer. V'chein pua shel idis, and matter growing in fertile soil. The roots of the matter we use to produce a red dye. And the Mishnah specifies that it was growing in fertile soil, distinguish it from matter growing in rocky ground, which has a different law. Okay, let's see. So Beis Shammai says, "Okrin oso be-marufo shel eitz." One may uproot them during Shemitah only with wooden spades. You cannot use metal spades that are ordinarily used for this purpose, because that would appear like you're working the land during Shemitah. So you must use a wooden spade, which is a shinoi from what's done regularly. Beis Hillel says, "B'kardumos shamatachus." One may uproot these plants even with metal mattocks, which is a kind of a pickaxe. Unlike Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel permit one to use a metal tool. Nevertheless, they still require a shinoi from the regular, so they can use a mattock instead of a spade. Modim bepua shel salaos. Beis Shammai agrees in the case of matter growing in rocky ground. That's matter, M-A-D-D-E-R, not matter with 2 T's. To those of the English perfectionists, it's actually pronounced matter, M-A-D-D-E-R. That one may uproot it even with metal mattocks, M-A-T-T-O-C-K-S, mattocks. Since rocky ground is not usually planted, people are unlikely to think the farmer's working the land. Therefore, they all agree that a matic of metal is permitted. Okay, fine. Mishnah Hey. May Messiah mutter adam likach luf b'motzei Sheviis. And when is a person permitted to buy luf in the year after Shemitah from an Aris? We said that it takes like 2 or 3 years to produce. So when can he buy a luf in the year after Shemitah? Rabbi Yehuda says miyad, he may buy it immediately after Shemitah because it's presumably grew in the year before Shemitah. Therefore, the year after Shemitah is not the the Shemitah for luf yet. Chachamim say mishayir chadash. One may buy it only for when the new 8th year crop of luf is abundant. According to the Chachamim, luf is treated the same as other produce. As such, a buyer must remember that the luf being offered for sale is Shemitah produce until the 8th year crop is available in the market. And Mishnah Vav. This Mishnah is based on the pasuk of Lifnei Ira Losite Mechshol, that before a blind man you may not place a stumbling block, meaning that you cannot help someone transgress a Torah law. Therefore, it's prohibited to sell certain items during Shemitah to an Am Aretz, because he might use them the wrong way if he's not observing Shemitah laws. So, Elu Kelin She'ein Ha'uman Rishai Sheviis. These are the farming tools that a craftsman may not sell to an Am Aretz during Shemitah. Achareisha b'chol kileh ha'ol v'hamizreh v'hadeker. A plow and all its accessories, a yoke to harness an animal to a plow, a winnowing fork, and a hoe. These are all farming tools. Since these tools are used only for work that's prohibited during Shemitah, the Amarats will presumably use them for that purpose, and therefore selling them to him on Shemitah is forbidden because you're helping him do an avera, do something wrong. Aval mocher hu magal yad u magal katsu ve'egla ve'agala v'chol kileh. But you can sell a hand sickle and a reaping sickle and a wagon and all its accessories, even to an Amaretz, because we assume that he will use these objects for the permitted purposes. Because technically the buyer could use the sickle to reap a small amount of Shemitah produce, and then bring the produce home in the wagon, which is totally fine, because you can reap what's necessary for immediate use of his family. You can't harvest larger amounts which is stored for several days. So since these tools are used for since these tools have a permitted use of Shemitah, and they can be sold even to someone who is not so careful to observe the laws, because even though you might do something wrong with them, they do have a permitted use in them, therefore they could be sold. Hayot Mishnah Zayim. Hayot ser mocher chamesh kadei shemen chamesh esrei kadei yayim. So a potter, someone who makes pottery, may sell up to 5 empty oil jugs and 15 empty wine jugs to an Am Aretz. Shekain darker l'havi min hefker. That is the amount of wine or oil one would typically bring home from ownerless property. When the Chacham estimated that when a person is picking from hefker property, he would not take more than the amount of olives that produce 5 jugfuls of oil or 15 jugs of wine. I'm not sure how they came up with those numbers, but that seems to be what. So in order to avoid someone from sinning, they may not sell him more than these quantities to someone who cannot be trusted with the laws of Shemitah. But if the buyer brought home more than the 5 oil jugs and the 15 wine jugs, it's permissible to sell him the number of jugs that he needs. After he has already collected large amounts of produce, we do not suspect him of having done so illegally. And one may sell more than 5 oil jugs and 15 wine jugs to non-Jews in Eretz Yisrael, because we're not afraid that they will resell them to Jewish Aretz. And they can sell more than this number to Jews living outside the land, outside of Israel, because we're not afraid that he's going to come to Israel and take it and store it up. He's probably going to use them in Chutz La'aretz anyways. Mishtaches. Beishamai says, Lo yimker lo parach hareshes b'shviyas. One may not sell him a plowing cow, the cow trained to pull a plow, on Shemitah, because he will definitely use it for plowing. And Beis Hillel matir, and Beis Hillel rule that such a cow is permitted. Because he can slaughter the cow. So it's lav dafka that he's using it to plow, and he could also eat it. Beishamai, on the other hand, forbids slaughtering the cow, because they hold that no one would slaughter a cow that was specifically trained to pull a plow. Sounds like Dr. Seuss over here. Um, you know, if, you know, you use the animal for what it was intended to be used for, and if it was trained to plow, then you're not going to shecht it, or not anytime soon. Mocher lo perus afila b'shas hazera. One may sell him produce, sell the Amar's produce even during the planting season, because instead of planting the produce, which is forbidden, he might eat it. And one may lend him one sa measure, even though one knows that he has a threshing floor, which is forbidden because it's used for storage. One may change most into prutos, meaning coins of greater value to coins of lesser values. Even though one knows that he has workers who did prohibited work on his land in Shemitah, is instead of using the money to pay him, he might use the money for a permitted purpose. Like you go into the bank and you want to change $100 bills into 20s, 10s, and 5s. That would be permitted, because you might actually use it for something mutter. The chulan beperish asurin. But all these transactions are forbidden if the buyer states explicitly that he wants to use them for something that is usher. If he specifically comes and tells you that my chair went loose, I get shocked every time that happens. When if the buyer is explicitly stating that he's using them for a prohibited activity, then it's usher to sell them to him and help him commit the avera. And finally, Mishtates Masheles Isha Lecharita Hachashuda Al Hashvias. Women may lend these utensils to her friend who is suspected of violating the laws of Shemitah, and they are as follows: Nafa, the kavra, the rechayim, the tanor, a sifter, a sieve, a mill, and an oven. These are permitted, even though her friend will probably use these utensils to prepare forbidden Shemitah produce, because it is possible that she's going to use it for something that is mutter. However, she may not sort or grind her friend's Shemitah produce together with her, because therefore she is directly assisting in preparing the forbidden produce. Eishes chaver masheles the eishes amaretz, the wife of a chaver, someone who's very careful about observing the laws of Tumah and Meiser, may lend to the wife of an amaretz, someone who doesn't observe these laws so carefully. Nafa, the kara, she can lend her a sifter and a sieve, uboreres, v'tochenes, umarkedes imam. And she may even sort, grind, and sift the produce together with her. That's mutter, even though the Aretz's wife might not meister the food before it's eaten, and they are thereby possibly preparing forbidden food. Ava Mishatatil Hamayim Lo Shigas. But once the Amaret's wife adds water to a flour, one may not help her knead it. She'ein Machzikin Yedei Ovre Avera. Because one may not assist those who are in the act of sinning. So when water is mixed into the flour, then the dough is subject to challah. At that point, it's usher to make the dough tameh, and since Amaret's wife and her utensils are presumed to be tameh, then she will be committing the sin of making the dough tameh as she needs it. Therefore, the chaver's wife is forbidden to help her knead the dough because this is actually assisting her in the transgression. Finally, the kulan lo amru ela b'nei darchei shalom, and all these acts are permitted. The Chachamim said that all these acts are permitted only for the sake of peace, to limit discrimination against people suspecting of violating the laws of Shemitah or the laws of Tumah and Meiser. So we may give no. So now here are a few more other things that were made that the rabbis instituted for the sake of peace. We may give words of encouragement to idol worshippers who are working their own land in Israel on Shemitah. And we actually had this early in Perek Dalet. They repeated here because these things are all the things that they enacted for the sake of peace. So you can give chizuk to the idol worshippers who are working their own land in Israel. But we may not encourage a Jew who is doing so. B'sholim, b'shloman, we may greet idol worshippers by saying shalom, which is one of Hashem's names, even on the holidays, on the pagan holidays. Shalom. These are acts that permitted for the sake of peace, to promote peace between Jews and non-Jews. And anytime you can prevent any harm from happening, then you can do so. That is the end of Perek Hey. We'll see you tomorrow for Perek Vav. Have a wonderful day.
Oh, yeah. Yitzie.